Back in action. We're gonna spend some time with Legislative Council on our miscellaneous ag bill and um, uh, Attorney Showman, are you gonna lead it?
I will, if I
Okay.
may.
Yes, you please, sir.
So I'll situate it here.
Welcome to Senate Agriculture. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Bradley Showman, Office of Legislative Counsel, and today I will do a walkthrough of the Senate Agriculture miscellaneous mini bill. And I am going to share my screen with the PDF so we can walk through it on the screen. Setting that up now. And I have a summary that was posted. I said printed out copies of the summary if you'd like to.
I will take your copy of it. If you do have one printed out, please. I seem to leave my computer in the other room.
Take them at your leisure and pass one down.
I've got it on screen.
So the summary just goes section by section.
Rob, you.
And I'll take that back. Thank you. The summary goes section by section of the bill. It's a longer bill, and so let's get right to it.
I couldn't keep Senator Major from that, and I kept going. Wow.
And so the first three sections are the municipal agriculture regulation sections. These sections are meant to undo the holding of Taft Street that we discussed last time I was in the committee. The holding of Taft Street permitted more extensive regulation, municipal regulation of agriculture by municipal bylaw. So the first section here lays out some findings for this municipal agriculture regulation section. Since the enactment in 2020 or 2004, it's been both the intent of the General Assembly and controlling law that a municipality shall not regulate farming, including the construction of farm structures. And the Supreme Court's decision misconstrued that history. And to avoid unchecked and unintended consequences of the decision, it's necessary for the General Assembly to clarify that municipalities under ordinance or bylaw shall not regulate farming or construction of farm structures as set forth in 24 BSA 4413D. And for purposes of section 2, it is the intent of the General Assembly to overturn the holding. I put that section in there because the Supreme Court did want to see, or did note that they did not see legislative findings. And in the decision, we won't comment on that, but we wanted to put that in there to make the legislative findings clear. So this next section, this is language that was posed by the Agency of Agriculture, and it does two things. One, it restores municipal regulation of farming to the pre-Taft Street status quo. And then the second thing it does is it actually expands upon what would be prohibited by municipal regulation. I'll go through point by point. It's just the important thing to know as we go through this is it is not just a return to the status quo. There is an expansion here. And by bylaw, a municipality shall not regulate the cultivation or other use of land for growing plants, including the list there. Raising, feeding, and management of small backyard poultry, excluding roosters. Those are things that would be added. And then this language would clarify the language the Supreme Court had a hard time with in the Taft Street decision. So this language says that farming that meets the minimum threshold criteria in the required agricultural practices rule and is therefore required to comply with the required agricultural practices rule. This language in isolation is what would return us to the pre-Taft Street status quo.
And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one of these sections. We have a lot to get through and not a lot of time. But I think that was important to get that language in there because from what I was hearing and what was being told to me as well was that the reason why the Supreme Court was actually saying, where's your language? Where is it? And if we had that language, probably there would have been a different outcome.
I think that's correct. I think that's correct. The decision was based on the plain language of the statute, and so we're spelling it out much more plainly. And so we won't go through each of these line by line. By moving on to page 4, these are changes to clarify definition and to spell it out. Section 3 is a change to required agricultural practices. Any changes to the required agricultural practices will have the effect of expanding what municipalities may not regulate by bylaw. And the big changes here are that the agency is proposing to increase the gross income of agricultural products from 2,000 to 5,000 before you're subject to the RAPS rule. We're moving on to page 6. They are proposing language that would permit them to regulate. It used to be 4 acres and more. Now they're proposing language to regulate 1 to 4 acres, to regulate farm animals and agricultural practices, so long as the activities have sufficient land base for nutrient and waste management. So this is another expansion of what the rules would regulate. And the next page, on page 7, it is another similar kind of expansion there. And we're moving on to page 8. And I will slow down and talk about anything more fully. I am trying to just get through all of this.
You're fine. We'll stop you.
So the Vermont Income Capital Gains and Property Transfer Tax. My colleague Kirby, I confirmed with him on this, and he graciously offered to step in at 11:30 to talk about this piece, and he has some notes that he'll share with you. So we're going to skip past this for now.
Okay.
And so we are scrolling down to section 6 on page 12. Accessory on-farm structure permit. So this will change the requirements that will say that no permit or permit amendment is required for construction or improvement of the on-farm accessory on-farm business for the storage or sale of qualifying products. It's changing the threshold, provided that the law used to be provided that 50% of the total annual sales of the prepared or processed qualifying products that come from the farm do not exceed.
Thank you.
The threshold used to be at 50%. Now they're changing the threshold to where you would not need a permit to $250,000. So instead of a percentage of an annual sales, it's just changing to a hard number.
Do we know where that number came from?
This is language proposed by the Agency of Agriculture, and so their policy rationales for this I'm not familiar with.
Okay, we'll bring him in.
And section 7, the agricultural land definition. This is meant to amend the definition of agricultural land to add a presumption that the land is used for agricultural purposes if it has produced an annual income from the sale of crops or the equivalent value of donated crops in 1 or 2 of the following categories. So the change here, if a farm donates crops instead of sells them, it can get the presumption that that land is being used for agricultural purposes if it meets these criteria for donated crops. Next section is farm kitchens. My colleague Katie will be.
Can I just go back just on that?
Yes.
Section 7. So I presume that the proof of them as far as donated crops would be in some kind of filing that they had with the IRS or some sort, or with the state of Vermont as far as looking for a tax advantage that they actually donated these crops and not just hearsay and on a slip of paper.
That would be the assumption. However, this language does not necessarily require that. And so let me check on that and get back to you.
Okay.
The proof of issue,
Yeah,
of the sale.
Or proof of sale or donation.
Because presumably the farm is taking that as a tax deduction, so that would be the assumption, but let me double check. Okay, Farm Kitchens is Katie will come in at 11:45 to discuss this, and so we are going to skip to page 17, section 10. So this is the this is Representative Burt's bill regarding a new electric generation siting, facility siting. And so this section would amend the criteria for citing a new electric generating facility to include a handful of changes. And the first change is that for a public hearing about the siting of a new electric energy generating facility, the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Market shall appear as a party. The siting shall also include, or the application for the siting shall also include the presence of total acreage of primary and then adding in secondary and local importance agricultural soils. So adding some additional information to the applications for the siting. For the certificate of public good that an electric generating facility needs to issue to ensure that their facility is for the public good. Going to add some requirement, or this bill will add some requirements to that. Including an audit of payback time on carbon dioxide emissions at the cost of the applicants, and an audit that includes a cradle to grave calculation, including resource extraction, mining, and procurement, production, manufacturing, transportation, deployment of and disposal of all technologies required, including solar panels, concrete footings, transformers, batteries, forest ecosystem destruction, and then foregoing 25 years of agricultural crops. At one point, this was 20 years in a version of Brett Burt's bill. The most recent version includes 25 years, so I updated that here.
Is there nothing in here for cleanup as far as after it's succeeded its life? Do they have to bond or anything for that to make sure that there's money there for restitution to clean it up?
I'm not, you mean to if the facility is at the end of its life cycle,
Yeah.
and then I'm not familiar with if they have to include that into the calculation. Let me check out
Because we talked about it, but I've never. Is there anything like in the quarry world there is that you have to set aside money to be able to reclaim it when you're done? And
well, you do hear from and again, I'm with you as far as that. You do hear, well, we have to restore this back to the original shape of or what the condition of what the property was. And I don't know that
if I file bankruptcy and have no money, it doesn't get cleaned out.
right.
I can check on that and get back to the committee.
Okay.
Next section is milk producers, and we are on page 23, section 11. This corrects an error in the statute. This statute allows a milk producer to request a hearing if they have a dispute with a purchaser. And so this statute amends section D here. If a request is made by the producer, refusal of the purchaser to participate in the hearing shall not become operative, or excuse me, refusal of the purchaser to not purchase the goods shall not become operative until a hearing of the decision by the secretary. So it just changes the language there. So the producer would be requesting a hearing, not the purchaser, when the purchaser is backing out of a sale to purchase milk. The next section is amends the farm to school program. And currently it is a grants only program. And this is another proposition by the Agency of Agriculture the agency would like to also permit contracts in addition to grants. And so the language in this section would permit the Agency of Agriculture to execute, administer, and provide local grants or contracts for the purpose of helping Vermont schools develop the farm to school programs. The rest of the language in this section amends that to say grants or contracts for that piece. You're on page 26 on section 13. Section 13 repeals the Interstate Pest Control Compact. This is a compact that existed for quite some time, I believe late 60s, early 70s. It went into the effect and it became defunct in 2013. This compact was an insurance fund. Hi, Kirby. This compact was an insurance fund that would help states mitigate pests outside of their borders. And due to a change in the IRS tax category that this compact was in, they became financially untenable, and they closed their doors in 2013. And so a number of states have kind of passed laws to not be in this compact anymore, and this would be ours. Kirby is here. So I suggest that we pause and allow Kirby to talk about sections 4 through 5, and then I can pick us back up on page 26 on section 14.
Sounds good.
Great. Kirby, let me scroll up.
Yeah, that would be great. I don't know if I have a link.
That's okay. You can just use my computer. It's you. Page number. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
There you are.
Thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Kirby Keegan, Legislative Counsel. I handle the tax portfolio for our office.
Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, let's talk about some fun tax stuff.
To bring your return. He's got a little side business that he does a little bit. So
Okay, so we are on section 4 and then page 9. The place in the law that we're at here is the definition of taxable income in Vermont's income tax chapter. And the language you have really starts on page 10, starting at line 8. There's 2 exclusions from taxable income here. To give you a little bit of the background, there's different ways to take something off of your income taxes. One is to exclude it, which would mean it doesn't even go on the return, this income. And that's what this is. You don't even report it. The second way to reduce tax liability would be through a deduction, which is where you do report the income, but then you take some of it away and it doesn't get taxed. And then a third way would be a tax credit, where you pay all of your tax liability, but you get a credit toward the tax liability itself. And that could be refundable or not refundable. So now that we, see different ways of approaching it, in this case, it's an exclusion. This is being taken or being left out entirely in taxable income. It wouldn't even be reported on a return. So the first exclusion here being proposed is the amount of any net farm profit, provided the taxpayer's net farm profit during the taxable year did not exceed $10,000. The way that would work is at the federal level, people report on what's called a Schedule F, their net farm profit to be taxed. Net farm profit would be all the income from farming, which under federal law, that's going to be set out to be certain things. And then you take all the farm expenses that are allowed at the federal level. And then that flows through to your Vermont return. And that would be your net farm profit that could be taxed in Vermont. So the proposal here would be if you don't have more than 10,000, you would not report that and that income would not be taxed.
So I'm not sure how many farmers there are whose profit doesn't exceed $10,000.
This looks like it's aimed at people who dabble in it and have a little bit of farm income, and it's probably not their main source of income.
We used to do a roadside stand that we didn't make that kind of money and
Really?
yeah, you do it as a hobby and
Okay,
a lot of hobby preparedness.
very well.
Or maybe somebody just getting started.
Yeah.
You know,
Would you like to see that limit go up?
I don't know what's a fair limit. I didn't. If it was my full-time job and I was only making 10 grand, I'd probably do something else.
Yeah, right. Do you know how they came up with the 10,000?
I don't know much of the background on this proposal at all. I'm kind of a mercenary here being called in. About that stuff.
Okay.
honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can definitely look into it for you though, and I think Bradley probably could shed some light on the background.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Seems arbitrary.
Yeah, so my read on this is the policy intent is to not provide this to people who are 100% full-time
Yeah.
farmers, but it's not to be what it's ordered for. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which, again, I don't know the background, and I do know that these proposals came from things that have happened in years past. But there are some issues with the next one. So the next proposal here, starting at line 10, would be to exclude net capital gain income from the sale of real estate that is part of a farming operation, provided the buyer continues using the real estate and is either related to the seller or was an employee of the farming operation for at least 10 years. That all seems discreet and understandable, but there's a clawback starting at line 18, where basically you lose the tax benefit if it's ever developed, and developed in this case is using the term from current use, right?
so without really confusing it, almost like a 1041 exchange, you're actually pushing off the tax liability. So later on in life, if the situation changes.
Yeah, and in tax law, there are clawbacks like this where if something you lose a tax benefit if something happens subsequent. I can't think of an example that I'm aware of where that happens with an exclusion though, where like you left it off your taxes. Because when you file your taxes, you're paying tax for that tax year, for that year. In this case, it would be you owe taxes years later potentially and you left it off your taxes in the year in which you earned it. That is not typically how that goes. So that's one issue. The example I can think of in Vermont, though, that we have a tax credit for 529 plans, the Vermont Higher Education Investment Plans. If you up to $2,500 worth of contributions you make to one of those plans per account, you can take 10% of that as a credit, right? And the way that Vermont potentially asks someone to pay that back later is there's a penalty if you take a distribution years later from one of those accounts and it's not used for the allowable purposes.
Can we put a time on that too? Like, because the person keeps it for 20 years, their intent wasn't to sell.
I'm about to get to, there's a few problems here, and that's one. So with the 529 plan approach, at least, so that would be one suggestion I would make if you want to pursue something like this. The precedent that we had would be maybe use a credit, maybe do it like the 529 plans, where there's, instead of saying that you have to pay the tax back or something like that, you would just create this separate penalty like that credit has. But that way we're not trying to talk about a tax debt that's hanging out there for years and years. In that case, it would just be a penalty that occurs later, right? So that would be one suggestion. Another kind of maybe bigger problem is with the compliance, the administrative side of this, though. We're taking a current use mechanism and we're going to try to apply it to the income tax. with current use, you have a lien on the property. And the compliance issue is kind of taken care of, where if you want that lien off your property, you're gonna have to pay land use change tax. We don't have a lien in this case. So the department would be in the position, so when it comes to current use, they don't have to track development. That's just, if you want the lien off, you gotta pay. So the lien kind of serves the purpose of any kind of compliance work that has to be done. We don't have that for this, so it would put the department in a position where they would have to learn about the development happening if someone doesn't voluntarily come forward and pay a penalty for development. And that's the same problem that happens with the 529 thing I was talking about, where if someone uses a distribution for 529 plan inappropriately, there's questions of how does the department go about finding out about that? That's tricky as far as the compliance side of it. But that same problem would exist here too. So it could be done through the tax credit with the penalty. But you're gonna have that compliance issue no matter what, because we don't have the benefit of the current use lien in this case.
But why couldn't you create a lien? Why couldn't you create a lien so that it would, I don't know how you would do that, but so that it would kick in something. I mean, as you're gonna use an attorney to change the use or change whatever, or change ownership or whatever, it's gonna show that there's a lien on the property. Well, what the heck is this? Well, this is what it's for. I mean, could you attach a lien to that?
We could look into that. I mean, the things that come to my mind are, is the income tax benefit here going to be worth it for someone to put a lien on their property? Under current use, you get pretty significant benefit. People go through that process. So that would be one question, is what is the benefit? In this case, I mean, the capital gain from the sale of the entire farm, I guess that's pretty significant.
It is.
So maybe people would be willing to do that.
Well, again, just for the other people, real estate world, 1031 exchange, I sold a business, here's my tax on it. But as long as I went and bought another, a business like that, the tax would defer. And then at some point in time, if I sold that second so I didn't roll that into another like property, well, then I pay the tax at that point in time. So there is a mechanism there. I just don't know the mechanism that we attach here.
Yeah, and it's tying it to development, makes the compliance side trickier. But yeah, there's different things to explore. I think the issue of putting a time limit on it, you'll want to talk to the farmer tax. They'll go through the administrative issues that they see, but I imagine that's one too, where it's like 30, 40 years down the road. They're like, what? It's like, oh, development occurred, and like, what do we do now? So I think they're going to have some questions about that.
Well, the trick is not to discover it that late, it's to discover it as it happens. And there needs to be something in there that gets discovered in a title search. So there'd have to be an attachment of something that said, there's a lien on this property. Okay, what's it for? I mean, we see that all the time in real estate. We see, oh no. And sometimes it's as simple as that you didn't get a lender to sign off on a note that was paid, or something triggered that. So, we'll talk to the Department of Tax.
Yeah, so I think they'll give you their view on it. I think, my take right now is maybe think about tax credit, maybe think about a penalty that applies. The lien would help with the compliance issue. And I think going from there. Okay, so moving on to the next section 5 is an exemption for the property transfer tax. It's similar to what we were just talking about, and that the exemption would apply for transfers of property that are part of a farming operation, provided the transferee will continue using real estate farming operation and is either related to the seller or was an employee, and it has the same clawback approach that's tied to the current use definition of development. Same issues apply as far as the compliance side and how will the department know when development occurred in order to go back and um, impose the penalty here, so to speak, or the transfer tax.
So you could put a lien of notice.
Yeah.
On the property when it transfers hands.
Yeah.
So it's always there.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to have something to trigger something for somebody to look for. That's what you have to have. You know, it could be as simple as that. There's a lien. Okay. What's the lien for? Oh, the lien's for this. Okay, well, we got to notify the tax department. We got to notify whatever. So there's a way to do it. Whether it's the right way, I don't know. We'll bring people in, we'll find out.
Maybe it's all the make.
Sorry.
I'm used to it. We're nine.
So that's it for the tax stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate it very, very much. As you can see, you've generated some thought and discussion already, so.
Yeah. And just let me know if you need me to work with tax to, you know, make adjustments.
Yep.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, yes, very much. Bye, everybody. Yep, have a good day.
And Linda, can you let me know when Katie pops on online?
Yes, not yet.
Okay, great. And I'm scrolling down to page 26. We are continuing on section 14. Get all the way to the bottom here. Slightly more than a half. Okay. And section 14, licensing pesticides applicator, the pesticide applicator licensing. This would amend the statute here to permit individuals to take the exam as many times as they'd like. The next
Is
section,
it currently limited?
it is currently limited to four. But yeah, I was gonna say-
Yeah, I think it's four. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it.
no,
I think
it
it is four.
I was going to say 3 or 4.
Yeah, okay.
And so it is currently limited. This would remove the limitation. We're not sure how many people are taking it more than or would like to take it more than 4 times. But this would remove that barrier if that becomes an issue. Section 15, the seed law conforming to universal standards. Okay. So these are sections 15 through 20, and I'll go through this, but I will not go through it line by line. These sections make small changes to seed law to conform to universal standards. And so let's start going through it. We are on page 28. Just clarifies the definition of labeling and to include the information that describes the labeled seed. We're moving on to page 29. The definitions, it's adding in definitions of distribute and distributor and treated. In particular, treated means seed that received an application of a substance process designed to reduce, control, or repel certain disease organisms and so forth. And this language will be installed in pieces in the section, in the remainder of the sections that are being amended in order to increase clarity and to focus on what is being addressed. We're on section 16. Changes to language, distributed and distributes. Just using that uniform language. Section 17, again, using the uniform language that was created in the definition section. We are moving on to page 31. Caution statements of the label, again, changing the language to make it clear. Section 18. More changes to the distribution language. We're scrolling on to page 32. More changes to that language. I will point out number 3 is added here. Failure for administrative penalties, adding a penalty failure to report the quantity of genetically engineered, treated, and untreated seeds sold in the state during the previous calendar year. Section 20, registration and reporting. Changes a fee. And we're moving to 34. And just some changes to the language here. To conform. There are lots.
A lot of language in here. What would you say, Attorney, Shulman? Is this just something that hasn't been, paid attention to? Is this in preparation because of treated seeds and non-treated seeds? What's this section, really trying to do, in your opinion?
The vast majority of the section is trying to update the language to conform to universal standards in the name of there's a compact that's cited
Okay.
earlier, recommended uniform sale of seeds law.
Okay,
And so the vast majority of this section is updating the language to do that. There are the piece that I pointed out with respect to the genetically modified seeds and that reporting. So there's increasing reporting requirements. There's changing in the fee structure.
sounds like more than anything, we're trying to find out what's getting put in our soils as far as for seeds and such like that.
That is exactly right. And so it's more information about what kind of seeds genetically engineered, especially with respect to genetically engineered material in pages 34 and 35. You'll see that disclosures of genetically engineered material, treated seed and untreated seed, and more information regarding disclosure of use of pesticide treated article seeds. And again, with genetically engineered material. I think this would be the policy rationale if there's something brewing, would be a good thing to have Steve Collier testify on. If there is something, there's a more policy impetus behind this that we're not.
Okay, sounds good.
And we are moving on to section 24 on page. Okay, this is actually a good stopping place because this one gets complicated. So Katie, I'm going to first of all mark where I am on page 36, section 24, and I'm going to scroll up to the farm kitchen section. Okay, Katie, and I can continue to share my screen and scroll as you go through this.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, Katie McLinn, Office of Legislative Counsel. Sorry,
Good
I
morning,
can't be
welcome.
there.
Thank you for
Good
coming.
morning. Sorry, I can't be there in person with you today. So there are two sections in this bill that define farm kitchen operations and set a fee for it. As I know, this committee is familiar because you worked on the cottage food products last year. There is a chapter in Title 18, which is the health chapter, that establishes a set of definitions for food and lodging establishments and food manufacturing operations and creates a licensure structure through the Department of Health and licensure fees. So what you're looking at in Section 8 is actually the same section that you looked at last year when you were looking at adding the cottage food products. We're looking at the exact same definition section. And here the proposal is to create a new type of food manufacturing establishment, and that would be the farm kitchen operation, which means an accessory on-farm business as defined in Title 24 that utilizes a dedicated kitchen facility located on the premises of a working farm for the purposes of preparing, preserving, packaging, labeling, or storing food products derived from crops, livestock, or other agricultural goods grown or raised on the farm for farm direct sales, donation, or distribution. So that is the definition. And from there, we have some renumbering happening. And in the definition of food, oops, can you, I'm sorry, pause. Yep, right there, top of page 15. And so we have an established definition of food manufacturing establishment, and it lists all different types of facilities that fall under the broader term of food manufacturing establishment. And if you look on line 6, farm kitchen operations would be added to this list, along with cottage food operations, food processors, bakeries, distributors, etc. So that's being added there. And otherwise, I think we just have renumbering for the rest of this section. Yeah. And then section 9, this is also a section that you worked with last year when you were looking at the cottage food products. This is the licensure requirements and the fees associated with each of those licenses. And as you may remember, each license type has its own set of fee requirements. So if you scroll down a bit, there's on line 16 and 17, there's the addition of food manufacturing establishments, farm kitchen operations specifically. And the fee there would be $75 as proposed in this draft. And that's all I have for you today.
Question about that? Okay. Katie, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, you're welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to be in touch.
We will.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
And we are back at page 36. This is a little bit of a complicated section. And so the Agency of Agriculture is proposing to move the Vermont Agriculture Credit Program from its own chapter in its own with its own board to being a subset of the Vermont Economic Development Agency, or VEDA. And so what this bill does is that it effectively repeals and redesignates the Vermont Agricultural Program from 16A to a subchapter of Chapter 12, which is where VEDA is located, Chapter 12, subchapter 16. So it's moving that program and nesting it underneath VEDA in the statute. And then so you'll see that everything here is underlined. That doesn't mean it's all new. In fact, most of this language is copied from the existing statute. It's just underlined because it's moving to a different place. But I will note that there are some items here that with just some small changes, and then I will note that some statutes, some subsections did not make the move, and I'll explain what those subsections are. So right now we have the definition section that has moved over. And the definition section is largely the same. So pull up my notes about what's changed. Definition section is largely unchanged. And just a couple of wording and language changes. I'll also change the order of this to make it alphabetical. And so we're scrolling down and we are on page 39. This section is also copied from the existing statute and moved on over. The statute is amended to highlight that both agriculture and forestry projects are eligible to participate in the Vermont Agricultural Credit Program. That does appear to have been the case already, but the language here is changed just to clarify that. And then we are looking at section B. And this is where we start to get into where ordinarily this section would say that the corporation that currently administers the VACP program, we're changing that language from the corporation that administers the program to VEDA, or the authority. So currently VACP has its own board. It is nested underneath VEDA, but it has its own board. They administer the program as on their own. The proposal here is just to move it for efficiency purposes.
We have those folks in.
Okay. Okay. And the loan eligibility standards is unchanged. What you will not see here, so I'm scrolling down. Okay. And so what you'll not see are things that did not make it over. So incorporation of the board of directors, that will not make it over because there will not be a board of directors specifically for this program. What that board of directors does, that did not make it over because VEDA is already authorized to do what the board of directors already does. And so this statute just says VEDA can administer a program in accordance with authority that it already has. And then the last bit that did not make it over was information about record keeping and confidentiality with loans. Those are aspects that VEDA already does and who were necessary to bring over. And then the last piece is the removal of the Agriculture Credit Development Fund. We've received instruction that that program is defunct anyway, and so they said that they did not want to bring that over in the move and delete that program from the statute. Any questions on that piece? Okay, great. And we're almost at the end. And so these are two recent additions here, permitting regarding large and medium farm operations to remove the fee for large farm operation. There was an annual fee of $2,500, or there is an annual fee of $2,500. This statute would remove that fee for a medium farm operation. There is a statute that requires a $1,500 fee. This would remove that fee. Steve has mentioned that there might be hopefully will be an appropriation to cover the cost here. The cost that would be lost of these fees is in the neighborhood, according to Steve, of $230,000. The last piece is a study asking about floor drain permitting. So I've been researching an issue related to how to permit floor drains for purposes of disposing of processed wastewater for washing off vegetables. And this issue is thorny at best and requires a lot of different moving pieces in terms of manufacturing the floor drain, coming up with a plan, what kind of wastewater, the uses of the facilities, and the jurisdiction of the Agency of Agriculture and the Agency of Natural Resources, and in addition to issues relating to potential wastewater and sewage issues. So there's a lot that actually goes into if a farmer has a facility that is just used for washing vegetables, they might have a floor drain that goes into an injection well. And the water might go into a sediment trap and then gets dispersed in an injection well into the soil and goes about it that way. If a farmer were to install a floor drain in an adjacent room, but that adjacent room is not just used for washing produce, they might run into an issue with citing and obtaining a permit for that floor drain. And unfortunately, the solution or the fix to make that easier for a farmer is not clear in our current regulatory framework because of different moving pieces, sanitation issues, usage issues, drainage issues, and manufacturing. And so what this section does is propose to ask the Agency of Natural Resources in coordination with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets to convene a stakeholder group to report on how to address the permitting process for installing floor drains for purposes of disposing processed wastewater into underground injection wells to better support farmers and the role in agricultural economy. The idea here would be similar to the Wood Products Manufacturers Report for Act 250 compliance and how the Land Use Review Board convene stakeholders to try and find ways to make that process more efficient for wood products manufacturers. This would be similar. It doesn't involve Act 250 at all, but the idea would be to examine this very discrete issue and propose some ways to make it easier for farmers if they want to develop floor drains in their farms. And then the effective date is currently July 1st, 2026. There as it stands right now, there are not any different effective dates in the bill. So this is the only one.
Thank you. So committee, the way to look at this, so we just got 15 bills posted to our wall. Or 14 bills posted to our wall. That's really what it is. So I would say to Emma, I would say to anybody else that has competing interest in this bill, get your people in here. It's time to talk about all this stuff. Depending on how that all goes, and depending on what we can get done and passed, it's a very ambitious miscellaneous bill. There's a lot of people, obviously, who want some stuff. And you know, we'll work diligently. Senator Major and I will, along with Linda and all the rest of you, will work diligently to get testimony in, but we've got a lot of work to do. So anybody who's listening and has something in this bill, it starts today. It's time to get hold of us. So we'll do the same. Committee, any other thoughts, comments on what's going on? Excuse me? We'll vote on it tomorrow. We're gonna at least give us some thought about it as well as make sure that committee's good. And so everybody's aware of that, right? We gotta vote on this because these bills have to get introduced and then we'll ask for it to be remanded back to us. Everybody good with that? But I do think it's the right thing to do is at least to sit on this overnight in case there's something in here that really doesn't sit well with one of you. So I will do that.
Yeah, the floor drain issue, how big an issue is that? Why'd that pop up? You know?
That popped up with constituent request, and I did speak with an individual from Bruce Douglas with the agency of the Department of Environmental Conservation of the Agency of Natural Resources, and it is not an issue that comes up with great frequency. However, it is an issue that is frustrating when it does come up. And it is one that requires a very skillful engineer to design a floor drain to make sure that it meets a number of requirements in order to ensure that wastewater or water is being processed correctly.
Yeah,
What's that?
I said we're gonna have to hear more on that.
Well, we're gonna have to because it's a lot more complicated issue than what it sounds. I mean, you're actually discharging waters, right? We know how important that is or how serious people take that. And so, yeah, that's just not a simple little thing.
And processed wash water from produce is not necessarily subject to wastewater regulations and things, but other wastewater from a facility, perhaps a farm kitchen, might be subject to those wastewater rules. And so designing your facility and structuring your drainage could potentially be a very thorny issue for a farmer who wants to, save some time and energy and resources in disposing of the wash water. It's a thorny, very narrow but thorny issue.
Questions? Oh, pretty good. Any comments from anyone else? Linda will go, please.